If you put it in there, it won't go.
Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. I think of this time of year, the end of August, the beginning of September, as the velvet season. It's about a 3-week period in which all those lovely, rich, velvety colours, the deep reds and purples and oranges and burnt ochres and umbers shine and glow. And that's something to do with the angle of the sun at this time of year, and also to do with the plants that thrive best after a long summer and before the cold weather comes. So you have this lovely period of a few weeks when the garden seems to have an extra lustre. This week, Carol looks at plant combinations at a prairie garden in Sussex.
How about this for a magnificent plant association? It's got all the elements you expect to see in a quintessential prairie planting.
And James Wong investigates a new take on growing your own at Bristol Zoo.
Here you go, boys. Got what you've been waiting for. You like chicory much more than I do.
The swallows and house martins are busy. Lots to do to prepare for autumn and even next spring and summer beyond. The dry garden hasn't really liked this summer. It looked fine until about mid-July. But because May and June, a lot of July, were cold, a lot of the plants didn't really prosper. However, there have been stars, and amongst them were these Verbascum, Verbascum olympicum, which for weeks in midsummer stood tall with a blaze of yellow flower, and they were fantastic. But now they've done their stuff. And they are short-lived perennials, best treated as a biennial. A biennial develops its foliage and roots in the first season, and then the following year grows further and will flower in spring and summer, set seed and die. So if I plant mature plants now that will flower next year, that will be great. Whereas if I just sow seed now, collect the seed from this and sow it, I won't see any of those flowers until 2017. So I want to plant a replacement batch, so I'll cut these back. Now I could keep that seed, so I'll hold on to the tops there. Now this is Verbascum Gainsborough, and if I take it out of the pot, you'll see there's quite a good root system. It's quite a substantial plant, and of course it needs that to support such a tall spike. One of the interesting things about Verbascums is they flower best in really poor soil. They don't like rich, deeply dug, composted borders. Waste ground, stony ground, hot baking conditions, that's where they're happiest. So a dry garden is perfect. For some autumn colour, I'm going to plant a bulb now which should flower in October. This is Sternbergia lutea. It's actually a member of the Amaryllis family, related to daffodils, and looks a bit like a daffodil bulb. In order to flower, it needs a summer baking. So always put them somewhere maximum sun, maximum protection, and where there's some warmth that can be reflected off the ground or the wall. They also need really good drainage. That's a little group planted there. I'll plant another couple of little groups around the other Verbascums. They will definitely flower this autumn. Whether they flower next year depends a lot on the weather this October, November, and even December. I have here a very particular style of gardening in these dry borders. The soil and the situation determines that. But of course you can apply a style of gardening by choosing your plants and how you grow them, regardless of your conditions. And Carol has been to Sussex to see a garden where plants have been chosen and combined to achieve a very particular effect.
I'm looking at the wonderful ways gardeners are putting plants together. From wild and naturalistic planting to fabulous and formal, and exotic feasts for the eyes. Today I'm looking at a style of planting that's reminiscent of the wild American plains, but has its roots in Germany, where it started in an attempt to find a solution to planting up parkland in a truly modern way. In Germany, prairie planting was pioneered as an ecological solution to managing municipal parkland. They used robust plants found on the American prairies and hybridized them, creating tough varieties that were low maintenance, had a long flowering season, and provided a habitat for bird and insect life. How about this for a magnificent plant association? It's got all the elements you expect to see in a quintessential prairie planting. Huge swathes of perennials, great ribbons of grasses, and all close together but planted generously. This is typical, this selenium, of prairie plants. It's got a German name and was probably developed there. It's called Rubenkupel, but its ancestors frequented those plains, those prairies. And it's glorious with this big miscanthus running behind. And the whole thing is backed by this eupatorium. It's Eupatorium maculatum. And I love the way in which those heads, the shape of those heads, almost cauliflower-like, is mirrored in this sedum that runs right along the base. It's absolutely beautiful. Pauline and Paul McBride built their garden on inherited farmland in 2008 and, with the help of family and friends, planted up 8 acres with more than 30,000 plants. Within 3 years, this garden was putting on a spectacular show. What's the secret, Pauline, of actually managing to keep these things upright? I mean, everything's standing to attention.
Well, the big secret, I think, is the fact that it's in a very open space. They've got full sun, they've got light, and they've got their friends around them, of course. And every March time, they're growing up in quite a strong wind, actually, which gives them stronger roots because they've got to struggle to survive.
Looking around, you're very aware of the fact that plants are happy. Nothing's elbowing its neighbours out of the way. You know, everybody seems to get on well.
They do. Most of them are finding their own space and their own relationship with their partners.
One of the most important elements in any prairie planting are grasses. In the background is this delightful Calamagrostis. It's Carl Forster. And he was the German grower who popularised grasses and introduced so many wonderful ones that we can grow in our gardens. In complete contrast is this delightful Descampsia, a form of the wavy hair grass. They're both quite different, but they both do what only grasses can do. They move so beautifully in the wind. They're a perfect contrast to these big clumps of perennials. Things like Calamaris, lovely daisies, or even the phlox in the background that you can glimpse through those waving stems, right the way through to these stiff spikes of the Liatris, so proud in the foreground of this beautiful planting. Prairie planting is an easy-going sort of discipline. Here's a perfect example. The echinacea, both white and pink, have been planted deliberately for this corner. But into them has seeded this Verbascum Chakesii album. It's the perfect match. It's actually got pink and white flowers. But if you accept that whole principle that you can allow plants to do wonderful things, then you get all sorts of exciting effects. One of the principles of prairie planting is always to choose plants that are going to love the conditions you can give them. Secondly, think of the spirit of the prairies. Try and recreate it by planting in as large numbers as you possibly can. Abandon your inhibitions. And thirdly, exult in the opportunity to give these boisterous plants the chance to be themselves.
My own grass borders here at Longmeadow are one of my favourite parts of the garden. I often come here and stand and look and importantly listen, because of course grasses make the most wonderful sound. And what I particularly love about them is the combination of structure, a real sense of volume and substance with lightness of touch and elegance. And no other planting does that. Of course, you can add colour. We've got Niphophis ruperi, which is flowering at the moment really vibrantly. And even when Niphophis aren't flowering, the foliage, this is Uvaria, works in brilliantly well with grasses. And one tip, if you're not used to growing grasses, start out with Miscanthus. They're very adaptable, easy to grow, and they look fantastic. Now, it's been a strange year for vegetables. Some have been fine. Lettuces, peas, any of the hardier vegetables have been good. But some of the more tender ones really haven't liked it, and this has been a bad tomato year for me. A low volume crop, very slow ripening. We've been eating them for about 6 weeks, but the taste is not good at all. And I put that down to low temperatures. And one of the things that I've had a lot of are split fruit. If you've had split fruit, the reason is twofold. It's either irregular, erratic watering, which is your fault, or irregular temperature, and there's not much you can do about that. And here we've had some very cold days, even colder nights, right through June, July, August, and that's what's done the damage. And if you're growing tomatoes indoors and they're reaching the ceiling now, cut them off. There is a point where you have to just accept what you've got and try and make it as good as possible. And I think tomatoes respond to that very much because the days are getting shorter, they're getting cooler. These tomatoes will ripen slower and slower. And you can see we've got quite a few green ones. And to get the best from them, you need to concentrate the energy. And by the way, you can defoliate them as much as you like. These will ripen perfectly well with no leaves on at all. Don't overdo the watering at this time of year. Water at most just once a week, but you can feed them. And if you water and feed at the same time with a liquid feed, that will be adequate. An awful lot of people grow tomatoes, well or otherwise, and they're one of the most popular vegetables, albeit being a fruit, that there are. But I guess not so many people grow turnips. They're not a sexy vegetable. That's a shame, because turnips can be really delicious, and it's not too late to sow some now. And then you can harvest them later in autumn, through winter and into next spring. I've got snowball, and I'm going to sow this patch of ground where peas were before. And I just plant them in rows. I use boards always because they're easy to tread on as well as give a spacing. So make a rill along the edge of a board or a string. And the secret of enjoying turnips is not to eat them too big. Pull them when they're golf ball size. Then you cook them whole, add a little bit of butter to the pan, glaze them, maybe a touch of sugar to caramelise them, and they're absolutely delicious. They have a real sweetness and that slight cabbagey tang, which doesn't sound great, but actually adds texture to them. They're lovely. And if you're used to growing vegetables, you'll recognise the seed as being quite similar to rocket, to cabbage. They're brassicas, and they're part of that family. And brassicas normally come after legumes in rotation because they use the nitrogen that's left in the soil from peas and beans. I have peas here, so this is perfect. Sow them very thinly. However thinly you sow, they will need thinning. It's a good idea to try and thin turnips, swedes, beetroot, any of these root crops evenly. That's the key to it. So you get nice, even growth. And really, as soon as they're big enough to handle, just go along and just pick out every other one or every few. And although that seems quite wasteful, you'll get a much better quality of vegetable as a result. cover the rows lightly to protect them. And then, of course, always label and mark where you've sown. Not least so that if weeds grow, you'll know that a line of fresh young seedlings are your turnips, whereas rather more erratic seedlings are going to be weeds, and you can weed them from day one. Those will germinate and grow. They'll be quite small as they go into autumn, but they're hardy. And they will stand throughout winter. You can harvest them as you need them, just pulling them from the soil right through into next spring. No trouble at all. That's easy. I'm pretty sure that I'll be successful with my turnips, but I haven't been quite so successful with my grapes. My initial problems with grapes were caused by blackbirds getting in and eating them all overnight. When I say all, they ate all the ripe ones. So I left the green ones to ripen, and the wasps have found them. And boy, do they love a grape. They're completely obsessed by it. They're in a great frenzy. Hundreds of the things. And of course, it makes it really difficult to harvest them. Probably pick 6 bunches in all, and that's it. So it's been a fairly steep learning curve. I'm not quite sure how to keep wasps out, but I will work on it. So next year, I try and keep them long enough so we can eat them, rather than feeding them to either blackbirds or wasps. Now, it's one thing to lose fruit and veg to wasps or blackbirds or pigeons or slugs, but quite another if you're growing specifically to feed to wild animals. And James Wong went along to Bristol Zoo to see how not only do they care for the occupants, but also how they feed them.
Not only do gardeners at zoos create amazing enclosures like this, using plants to provide shade and shelter, which encourages natural behaviour, here at Bristol Zoo, they're also enriching the animals' lives by growing their own food. With everything from flamingos to western lowland gorillas and invertebrates too, homegrown extras ensure the animals have a full and varied diet.
It's the things that we can't get hold of very easily that we'll try to grow here, and particularly specialist things for animals, that perhaps the chicory for giant tortoise, to make sure that there's high levels of protein in that diet and in that particular type of food.
How do you decide what you're going to feed them? Do you have a meal plan?
Well, there is a list that the animal staff will send up to the nursery.
You've got effectively a shopping list of what they're being fed.
There. Yes, absolutely.
By animal. Red panda, 20 branches of bamboo. I love that.
It adds to the welfare of the animals, enriching their diet, making sure that they're healthy and keep well.
With that shopping list in mind, I've come to meet head horticulturist Eddie Mole to help him gather up some food from the zoo's nursery site, Wild Place. Eddie, I wondered what a giant animal allotment would look like, and, well, just like every other allotment, what are you picking?
Well, this is chicory for the giant tortoises.
So this isn't chicory as you'd recognise it from a greengrocer's. We normally would grow it for young, tender shoots.
That's right.
And this is way past flowering, absolutely covered with thick, fibrous growth.
This would be last year's crop that we've just left there, and this is the second year of use for them.
More fibre, potentially more nutrients, better for animals.
They love it. What we're trying to do is enrich the diet of the animals, so therefore a little bit of a lot of different things, all freshly produced.
Goodness me, radicchio, Thai basil I've seen, chard.
Yeah.
You've got such a jungle of sunflowers here.
Yeah.
What eats these?
Parrots and birds and lots of things like eating the seeds and picking the seed heads out.
There's some amazing stuff I've seen kicking around here, some of my favourite tropical plants. You guys are famous for having the national collection of Hedychium, ginger lilies.
Yes. And I think, although primarily we grow them as a garden plant and as a plant heritage collection, they're a really useful landscape plant in the zoo to make things look tropical. But they're also a fodder plant because under glass and under cover they have their leaves all year round. It doesn't affect the plant because they're rhizomes, so they just shoot again, providing we don't crop them too heavily.
So it's secondary use for if you're doing pruning, instead of having to compost it, you can enrich animals' diets.
It is, yeah. Incredibly useful plant, really.
Wheelbarrow full, it's feeding time at the zoo. Here you go, boys. Got what you've been waiting for. You like chicory much more than I do. Right, I'm cornered and running out of food, so I'll leave you guys to it. Ryan, gorilla food, bamboo and maize. There you go, you're welcome. Well, it's the last stop on the feeding trail. I've got some drill monkeys to tend to, and I've got some hedychium here and some spent sunflower heads for them. It's so weird to be on the other side of the glass.
Yes, yeah, not many people get to see this.
Yeah, what a privilege.
We try and spread it far and wide, you know, but we want to make sure that everyone gets their fair share.
I know all of these plants as, like, common garden plants. You'd never think that you'd be growing this for animal feed.
Oh, they love all of it. Anything that's different. They'll spend ages picking through the sunflower heads. It keeps them stimulated, and obviously it's good for them.
Well, that's really nice, isn't it? You cut down the national collection of hedychium to feed to zoo animals, and we'll eat everything else. There's one up there with a stand of corn. There's a big guy over here coming up with some sunflower spent heads. You know, maybe they're saving the best till last.
Oh, look. Who needs a zoo when you've got frogs on your hedges? Perhaps I should be glad that it's wasps and frogs and pigeons and not monkeys eating my garden. Now, what's attacking my box plants is a fungus, box blight. And a few weeks ago, I had a visit from the RHS to give me advice on how to deal with it, because there are many conflicting views and approaches. The good news is that the situation is recoverable. It's not a death sentence. The bad news is that it might need major surgery to get back to having the hedges and topiary looking half decent. So what I'm going to do is take all these hedges back by half, and it's hedge cutting season. So even if you haven't got box blight and you don't need to do remedial hedge cutting, now is the time to give your hedges a trim. If you want a level top to the hedge, it's always useful to have a guide. Strings stretched between bamboo canes is a good way to establish the line, and a spirit level will get accuracy. When you're doing any kind of hedge cutting, make sure you use an implement, whether it be mechanical or by hand, that is comfortably capable of doing the job. Don't strain, because that way you lose control and can have accidents. Make sure the top is narrower than the bottom. This is called establishing a batter, which is essentially a slope so that the bottom of the hedge gets plenty of light. I'm removing the thicker stems with secateurs to make sure there is no dead wood and maximum light can reach the new shoots. There are two things I have to do now. The first is to disinfect any implements I use. This is simply a spray of disinfectant. If you're really worried about spreading blight, don't use the same shears, hedge cutters, secateurs, whatever it might be, on blight and non-blight affected material. Keep them completely separate. All I'm doing is a little bit of basic hygiene. And then the second thing is to clear up scrupulously. Every scrap, put it into a barrow, or if you're worried about it blowing around, into bags, and then either burn it or bin it. And by binning it, seal it in bags and have it taken away. And then let's hope, and I feel in my bones that this may come good. Okay, this is a big job. It's going to take me more than just this weekend to do it. But here are some other things you can do and finish this weekend. Now is the last chance to sow salad crops for winter and early spring harvesting. Choose the varieties carefully, such as Mitsuna, Mibuna, Langcress, Rocket, or winter varieties of lettuce. Sow them thinly in a seed tray, water them either from above or below, and put them somewhere protected, although they don't need heat to germinate. And then prick them out as soon as they're ready and you have space available. If you've grown wallflowers from seed, or you've bought young seedlings, it's a good idea to pinch out the growing tips. This will encourage side shoots to develop, so that when you plant them out in a month or 6 weeks' time, they will be strong, bushy plants. Over the next few weeks is the ideal time to take cuttings from evergreen hedging plants, such as box or yew. And yew is surprisingly easy to take. Choose strong, healthy growth and pull off the side shoots so that they have a heel attached. Strip off the lower leaves and use a very free-draining compost, pushing the cuttings in against the edge of the pot. Put them somewhere protected, but it can be outside. Water them and then leave them to root, and this may well take 6 to 9 months. It's strange, you think of figs being part of a baking Mediterranean summer and that you need a hot summer for them to ripen. Not true, actually. This has been a cold, rather grey summer, and yet the figs are fantastic and ripening fast. This is a variety called brown turkey, and you can tell when they're ripe because they hang down. And if you just put your finger there and lift it up, it comes away in your hand. And that is ripe and ready to eat. I like them raw like this. Can't beat them. Try a bit of fig? Not sure he likes it. Oh well, all more for those that do. Well, that's it for today. I'll see you next time here at Longmeadow. Till then, bye-bye. Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. Now this is the spring garden. And as the name suggests, it performs at its best between about early February and the middle of May. And then it just quietens down and gently ticks over during the summer months. It's its dormant period, really. But now, as we're entering into autumn, things are beginning to rev up. Now, a lot of that is going on underground and you can't see it. But we can help things by cutting back, a little bit of dividing, some planting, particularly of bulbs at this time of year, to make sure that next spring's display is as good as it possibly can be. This week, we go to Derbyshire to meet the photographer Emma Seward to get some tips on capturing the wildlife in your back garden on camera.
Patience is the one thing that I would nurture if you're going to go into bird or insect photography. I've waited for up to 2 hours for a good shot that I've been happy with, but it pays off in the end.
And in the last of our series exploring planting combinations, Carol visits Great Dixter in Sussex, home of the late Christopher Lloyd, to celebrate its fabulous mixed border.
There are shrubs, trees, climbers, perennials, annuals and bulbs. The whole lot artfully put together.
This foliage belongs to the Lenten rose. And it's one of the stars of the spring garden. They cross-hybridize and spread really quite prolifically in here. However, there is a slight problem that they've got and is very common amongst the oriental hybrids, which is hellebore leaf spot. This is a fungal problem, and you can see here these chocolate streaks and splashes on the leaves. Cut them off right at the base and remove the whole leaf. We've had this very wet, quite sort of mild weather, and it will spread. And there's no question that come next February there'll be more of it, but try and limit it because it can affect the flowers. As well as going through the spring border, cutting out bad material, it's a good time to move anything, because then when you replant them, the roots will grow strongly and they'll be in good shape to flower when they're ready next spring. And Pulmonaria start flowering about February time and flower for ages, right through into the end of May. And they have another really good virtue too, which is that bees love them. So I'm going to lift this clump here and take some of it to my wildlife garden and the bee-friendly border. You'll see that it's actually made up of a whole series of plantlets, each one of which could become a new plant. And because it's a herbaceous perennial, it grows outwards. So it's a good thing to do every 3 or 4 years. Dig up a clump, break it up, get rid of the middle, which is the old bit, and will be flowering less well, and then replant it in 2 or 3 new clumps. And that will have new vigour and flower better next spring. Pulmonaria are a magnet for insects early in the year. And we went to visit a photographer in Derbyshire who's a keen gardener and loves to grow plants, but particularly those plants that will attract insects.
I love getting up in the morning and going to my office. It's my back garden. I usually get up about 7 o'clock in the morning, grab my camera and get out into the garden and start photographing. Insects are probably one of my favourite subjects to photograph. They just fascinate me, and they're hugely valuable in the garden. You've got so many different pollinators, not just the bees that people know about. You've got your bumblebees, solitary bees, you've got hoverflies. There's so many of them, and they're all hugely, hugely important. Certain insects will prefer certain types of flowers. So I've tried to tailor my planting to sort of what insects I want to attract and what insects are already in the garden. So I've planted lots of borage. Borage is brilliant. It's really high in nectar, and it was absolutely covered in bees in March and April when they first came out. Knapweed as well is another one that's fantastic for butterflies, and we've had meadow browns today. I think they've hatched from the meadow across the road. And wallflower, Bowles mauve, perennial wallflower. It's one of my absolute favourite plants for insects. It's in bloom sort of most of the year, so you get lots of bang for your buck. And butterflies and bees just go nuts for it. It's great. Succession's really important. Things like Pulmonaria is really, really great for early nectar. Then you move through into your annuals. They sort of start to come into life. My cornflowers at the moment and cosmos are great. And then your buddleia comes through just as the butterflies hatch. So if you can try and have something in bloom that's pollen and nectar rich, sort of from February, March time all the way through until October, the insects will love you for it. Leafcutter bees are fascinating. They are the bees that cut the little semicircular holes out of people's rose leaves for their nests. They're so easy to attract into your garden. Just put up a bee hotel. Bee hotels are cheap and easy to make or buy. I made mine out of an old wine box, and I've just filled it with bits of bamboo canes. And if you build it, they will find it and they will come. And it's a great way to introduce children to bees and insects and wildlife. They're harmless, they won't sting you, they keep themselves to themselves. My lawn, you can tell there's not much grass to it. There's a lot of self-heal, buttercups, daisies, it's full of wildflowers. And there's these big patches of white clover that I've left unmowed. And it's a lovely patch of floral bee heaven in the middle of a lawn. Our pollinators are in real trouble. They're losing a lot of habitat, and they have been for many, many years, since the Second World War. So I think anything that we can do to help them. You don't have to have an entire meadow. We've left half of our lawn unmowed, and we call it Short Meadow. I'm sure Monty would love that. As well as insects in the garden, we get lots and lots of birds. And one of my favourites is a little lady who comes to see me almost every day for her mealworms, and that's our female song thrush. I first photographed her in January on the Cotoneaster berries. I was really happy with that. That was a shot and a half to get. It took me a couple of weeks. So patience is the one thing that I would nurture if you're going to sort of go into bird or insect photography. Choose a flower that you'd like to focus on and just wait. I've waited for up to 2 hours for a good shot that I've been happy with. But it pays off in the end. I think some of the best pictures are where you get onto either a bug's eye level or a bird's eye level. I've got a picture of a frog in the grass that is one of my favourites, and I am literally sort of eye to eye with this frog. He's just looking at me and I'm looking back at him. I love him. We rent our house, so we're reluctant to spend a huge amount on the garden, but you don't have to spend a fortune to have a lovely, lovely garden. We try and do everything as thriftily as we can, so I'll use toilet roll inners to sort of start my seeds off in, and that's good recycling as well, and they'll biodegrade down into the soil. And I grow as much as I can from seed. And cuttings as well, growing things from cuttings. I'll have dozens of plants for pence that'll be flowering next year, and the bees and butterflies will love me for it. So you don't have to spend a fortune. A bag of compost, some toilet rolls and a few seeds, and you've got a garden.
Of course, the main wildlife in this garden is hairy and called Nigel. But I do like that idea that if you want to see interesting insects or birds or anything, just be a bit patient. Now, this part of the garden had been where I grew my soft fruit. And then about 5 years ago, I moved it, and it's really sort of not had anything done to it at all since then. So this year, I thought I'd make a pond. And it's amazing how quickly the wildlife has come. And just looking in here, I can see 5 little frog heads peeking out the water. And those frogs came within days almost. I put an old log in the water. It doesn't look very beautiful, but fabulous for wildlife. And the other crucial thing, if you're making a wildlife pond, is to have a beach. So there is a shallow slope going down with stones at the end, so everything from hedgehogs, grass snakes can all get in and out easily. And also let the blanket weed and the algae remain. Don't try and remove it, because it's really good cover. In autumn, October time, November, then you can take it out, when most of the animals are either stopped breeding or hibernating and moving away. So it's that attitude, really, that makes a wildlife pond different from one that's purely decorative. Now, in the border next to it, what I've tried to focus on are plants that are really good for the bees. The crucial thing is to have flower heads that are accessible. So, for example, scabious of any kind is perfect. And the agastaceae have been brilliant for the bees. They've just loved it. And I'm going to add the pulmonaria to the edge, so that's another layer of flowering for the bees earlier in the year. Now, pulmonaria are woodland plants, so they're happy in light shade, which is what we'll get here. And I'm going to put them up front because they grow fairly low. I'll just plunk them in the soil. If you've got big leaves, cut them back, because that's really asking a lot of roots that have been dug up and moved. And that will be happy in their new home, and because they've been moved, they'll have extra vigour, and that will quickly make a clump twice the size of that, and then when it's too big and encroaching on the space of plants around them, they can be lifted and divided in turn. And as always, anytime you plant anything, give it a drink. Come on, wildlife. Come on. Last summer, we paid a visit to RHS Hyde Hall, and I tasted the melons that were growing there, and they were absolutely fabulous, really delicious. And I felt very frustrated by this because I've grown melons for years, but I've never got them to taste very good. So this year, I thought, OK, I'll grow melons, but I'll make them taste as good as the ones at RHS Hyde Hall. So that was the challenge. I planted a couple in a raised bed. Total disaster. I planted some in a hotbed in a cold frame, and they're okay. They're not doing too badly. But I've planted others in here, which is the way I normally grow them, growing up a tripod in the greenhouse. And they're not too bad, but they're hanging by this really quite thin tendril, the fruit. And there is a risk, as they get bigger and bigger, that they might fall and break before they ripen. And so they need some support. You need to create a hammock for them. But it must be one that's got some light and air to get through. So old netting, sort of a fruit cage that's got lots of holes in it and you can cut a bit of netting is ideal. Maybe an old pair of tights, if that's what you have to hand, that would also work. But cut a square, then tie string or twine at one end and just thread it through. And then we will put that underneath the fruit. So if we go around there and we tie one end on to the canes, like that, so it's really tight, and then we will carefully go underneath it like that. So all that's happening is it's just taking the weight and supporting it, and that will grow bigger and fill out. And I'll know that it's ripe by two things. If you take the end and just press gently, don't ram it, but just gently squeeze it. If it gives a bit, then it's getting ripe, and if at the same time you smell it and you get that lovely honey, sweet aroma from a good melon. If those things are happening, then you can harvest it. I don't think this will be ready for another 2 weeks. Now, if you're not growing melons at home, then you won't be making net hammocks to support them. But here are some other things that you can be doing this weekend. Earwigs can eat a dahlia ragged. And this is because they hide up in the closely packed petals, so give them somewhere else to go. And the best way is an upturned pot filled with straw or packing material, balanced on a cane. The earwigs will go in there at night, and in the morning you can take them out and deal with them as you see fit. If you water rhododendrons, azaleas or camellias now, especially if they're grown in a pot, they're much less likely to lose their buds before they flower next spring. Give them a good soak every week for the next month, and they should flower extra well next year. You can ensure a fresh supply of mint leaves by digging up a clump now, cutting back the top growth, and planting it in good potting compost. Put it somewhere warm, like a greenhouse or a windowsill, and water it well. And as the outdoor mint slowly dies back, your new supply will start to produce fresh leaves. Across this summer, Carol has been visiting gardens with fabulous plant combinations, selecting and analysing those which can transform our gardens. This week, to conclude her journey, she's looking at a mixed border in one of the nation's best-known gardens.
I've been looking at the exciting ways gardeners are putting plants together. And this time, I'm at Great Dixter, a garden created by my all-time gardening hero, Christopher Lloyd, famous for his adventurous and inspired planting combinations. We're going to look at the long border, which is a wonderful example of mixed planting. There are shrubs, trees, climbers, perennials, annuals and bulbs, the whole lot artfully put together. The whole idea of mixed planting probably grew out of the tradition of cottage gardens, where you put everything in together. And if you had a small garden, then you really had no option. But in gardens of this sort of size and scale, it was quite different. You'd have shrubs in your shrubbery, your roses would be in the rose garden, and if you had a border of this kind of length and extent, then almost certainly it would have been a herbaceous border. Short stuff at the front, tall things at the back. Christopher Lloyd took all those rules and he chucked them out of the window. He wanted to put things together which would look good together regardless of what they were. So there are shrubs here, this lovely viburnum opulus, a form of our native Guelder rose, laden with berries. Right next door, there's a huge rose, and in the front, there are cannas. Alongside, there's a big blue haze of ageratum, a plant you're more used to seeing in municipal plantings. But it's all combined together in such a glorious way, really well thought out, and yet creating this beautiful, informal picture. Great Dixter is managed by a team of dedicated gardeners who continue to plant in an inventive way. Rachel Dodd has been working here for the last 4 years, and she and the whole team work hard to keep it looking good all year round. When you're working on somewhere like the mixed border, succession is an enormously important part of your planning, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. You have to think of a main scene. You have to pick a moment in the year which seems contradictory to succession planting, but it's not. You have to say, these plants are all going to look good together in July or in August. But you've got to not be too greedy with that and give enough space around them to put in your September season plants, which could be asters or could be persicarias or something. And then you can put in layers of plants that lead up to that main season.
What's so great about mixed borders is that they're relevant to all of us, you know, to a very small space just as much as on a big scale like this.
If anything, it's more important in a small garden, you know, to have succession and to build up layers of planting and to have height and to have drama. I think so.
Yes. The whole long border is punctuated by these big shrubs or splendid clumps that spill out and stop you in your tracks so that you concentrate on the whole picture you can see. Here, there's this theme of creamy white. It starts off right up against the sky with this big privet, Ligustrum kihuii, with these big tumbling sprays of flowers, and comes down to the hydrangea, paniculata, picking up the same colour theme, but this time a totally different form, a grass, Miscanthus cosmopolitan. Isn't it magnificent? And it gives this whole border such presence, such stature. Alongside it is a big blue salvia, so you get these splashes of colour every so often. Sometimes with perennials, sometimes with annuals like this tagetes. Isn't that just wonderful? And then you finish this particular episode of the border with this euonymus, Now, this is a plant we're used to seeing as ground cover on a tiny scale. But just as with everything else here, we really see what the plant can do, given the chance to really shine. And how's this for an extraordinary plant combination? Here's a pine, Pinus mugo, and in between it, intermingling and popping up here and there, toning exactly with the orange needles on the pine, is a crocosmia. Big and soft and beautiful, and in complete contrast texturally to the pine. And look a little further, there's Spirea bumalda. But in amongst it is another golden leaf plant. It's Melissa officinalis aurea, the golden leaf form of lemon balm, and it wanders through the border and pops up again, making a completely different contrast with the pine. It's just magnificent. One of the main things to learn from the planting at Great Dixter is to be bold. Try doubling the size of skinny borders and let rip with plants that you know are really going to work. And above all, be adventurous. Have huge amounts of fun.
I've really enjoyed seeing this journey through lovely gardens, analysing the plant combinations, and having it shown so clearly the way that if you're careful and selective about it, 2 or 3 plants put together can always amount to more than the sum of their parts. For example, here in the Jewel Garden, there's fennel, which grows like a weed, combined with the coneflower Rudbeckia, dead easy to grow, found in 1,000 gardens across the lands, but put the two together with the different quality of yellow and the different shapes, it's a combination that always pleases me. There's a nest of swallows here in the potting shed. Been here all summer. This is the second brood, and the parents are frantically feeding them because, of course, the quicker the birds can fledge and get out and feed themselves, the better they'll be prepared for the long, long journey south, which has to take place for them certainly in no less than a month, and could be just in 3 weeks' time. So it's a race against time. Back in March, I sowed some outdoor varieties of tomatoes that claimed to be blight resistant. Blight has been something I've had to deal with many times here at Longmeadow, but so far this summer, I haven't seen any signs of it, and reports of blight across the country have been down from last year. But these tomatoes are presenting another problem. The cordons, grown as a single stem, with the side shoots pinched out, have grown better and produced more fruit than the tomatoes in the greenhouse. However, the fruit have hardly ripened at all. The bush varieties have grown really well. Masses of growth and masses of tomatoes, but they're not ripening. And the chances of them ripening now in September are getting slimmer and slimmer as the days get shorter and the weather gets colder, because the cover is stopping the sun getting to them. It's also increasing the risk of blight, because blight is produced by warm, wet conditions, poor ventilation, and that's perfect for the fungus to spread. So the important thing to do is to help them ripen as much as possible. And just as we did in the greenhouse, remove any extra foliage so that maximum sunlight and heat can get to the fruits that are formed. The next thing to do is to cut off any flowers at this stage. However, the bush varieties, you can prune back a bit. We could cut foliage off. At the same time, we're cutting fruit off. It's almost impossible to separate the fruit and flower trusses from the foliage. When I was a young child, we always grew chrysanthemums at home, and it was grown in the greenhouse, and there was an enormous amount of labour and paraphernalia that went on getting these perfect blooms. And so I haven't grown them for most of my adult life. Well, this year I am growing some, and I'm delighted to do so because they're an undervalued flower, and that's a pity because there are some lovely varieties. This one, bronze, Talbot Parade, just beginning to shine in the border, and I like that marmalade-y colour that's coming through. Chrysanthemums haven't liked this summer very much. It's been pretty rotten weather for them. But stick with them because autumn is their time. And they will, with a bit of luck and good weather, keep flowering well into November. So there is a lot to cherish and relish with your chrysanthemums. I do think that the point that Emma made about watching wildlife is worth remembering, which is to give yourself time. Find a spot in the garden, sit, perhaps with a cup of tea, and let things happen. You're bound to see something. And it might be a great hairy lump who really wants to sit in your lap, but it also might be a magical moment with a dragonfly, or a frog that just lifts its head up out the water and looks you square in the eyes. However, we've run out of time today, but I'll see you next time. Till then, bye-bye. Hello, welcome to Gardener's World, and a very perky Nigel today. He's on good form. But the garden is in a confused state, as well it might be, because we've had a funny old year. Here at Longmeadow, it was very cold and dry in May and June, and the national average was colder and drier than normal. And July and August were cold and wet, and unseasonably nippy. And plants have behaved slightly oddly as a result. We've got a whole mass of foxgloves flowering in autumn, whereas they should be flowering in spring. We've got hellebores flowering. Now, those normally would be at their best in February and March. But here we are, perfectly healthy plant, flowering really nicely, way out of season. It's not a disaster. It's not a sign of imminent collapse of the whole system of things. It's simply a plant that has gone off-piste. So don't worry if you see eccentricity in plant behaviour. Enjoy it, observe it, and then maybe over a period of time, you can get a pattern that you can respond to. And I will be adding to the plants in this part of the garden at Longmeadow later on. And also, I'm going to be celebrating those veg that have done really well this summer. This week, Rachel visits the WI in Bath to see what they're cooking up in their centenary year.
That is really good. This makes me feel connected and proud to be a member of the Women's Institute.
I want another one. They're very good.
They are, aren't they?
And the garden designer, Matthew Wilson, has a plan to brighten up a north-facing wall in his new garden. It's bulb planting season, and I've got a terrific bulb here. For a start, it's a whopper. And this is a fritillary, Fritillaria persica, known as Adiaman. And it's got wonderful, deep, rich, purple, burgundy flowers. It will come back and back year after year. Now, these are not particularly cheap. Individually, they're going to cost you about £5. If you buy them by the dozen, you could probably knock that down to about £3. But in any event, they're not disposable. It's worth taking care to get them off to a really good start. I'm going to put them in here because although they come, as the name Persica implies, from Central Asia, around the Middle East, on mountainsides which are scorched in summer and well drained, they actually will thrive perfectly well in light shade. And essentially, that's what we have here. Okay, let's get a spade. I'm going to plant a clump of 3 bulbs. So a bucket-sized hole. This is not just a few inches below the ground. And the more stem is underground, the better and stronger it will grow. And this is quite a fleshy stem. So it does want to be somewhere where it's not going to be buffeted by the wind, because they can snap. Now I'm going to put a bit of grit under there so they don't sit in a puddle. There is a central hole in each bulb. Sometimes it's more marked than others. So if you plant them normally, with the top at the top and the roots at the bottom, there is a risk in very wet, heavy soil that actually they will rot, because water will get in the middle of the bulb, sit in it, and then they'll rot away. So it's a good idea to plant these on their side. So I'll just pop that one there like that. We'll put another one like that. And another one there. And even though they're on their side, the shoot will come out from the top, turn right angles, and come on up perfectly well. And that way it ensures that they don't rot. If you've got very sandy soil, then you can plant them the right way up, normally. But if you've got any doubt at all, put them in on their side. And that's it. I'll just backfill over the top of that. I don't need to add any bone meal or any goodness like that at all. They're perfectly happy with this type of soil. And then just cover it over, label it, and they will start to appear in spring. I often feel that light shade is one of the best growing conditions in the garden. But real shade can be tricky, and you do have to choose very carefully to make the most of it. Now, Matthew Wilson has recently moved to a new house, and he has a shady wall to plant up.
Well, this is what I'm going to do today. I've got this north-facing wall. It's not particularly beautiful to look at. Some leftover camellias. I'm going to make some raised beds, plant the camellias, and turn it into a thing of beauty. Fork. Now we need a wood saw and a mattock.
I'm going to make my raised beds using wood that's reclaimed edging board, which I'm cutting to size. It should last for several years.
So this is really just loosening the material underneath, making sure the drainage is okay, and giving me a good workout at the same time.
And because I'm planting next to the house, there are a couple of extra things I need to bear in mind.
This is a damp-proof coarse membrane. Everything below that is effectively impermeable to the damp. What you should never do is get soil above the damp course. Now, if you've got any doubts about any of this, or your house is very old, or it's listed, or it doesn't have a damp-proof course at all, which is the case with some older properties, you should get some advice first.
And to build the beds, I'm simply screwing the 4 boards to 4 corner posts and making sure my sides are level. The first thing I'm adding to the bed is well-rotted manure and topsoil.
Now, my soil here is neutral, and camellias like neutral to acidic soil, so to be absolutely certain, I'm adding in some peat-free ericaceous compost. And this is really to ensure that they get all the right nutrients and minerals that they need to thrive.
With some help from the kitten, Banjo, my beds are ready to plant. I'm fixing training wires to the wall as high as I hope the camellia will eventually grow. To make sure they're secure, I always drill into the brick. And I like to make sure that the wires are really tight, so I secure one end of the wire using a barrel strainer or turnbuckle.
And you get that tight enough, you can play the theme from Deliverance, you know, the banjo thing. Perfect.
When planting in a bed like this, I always make sure the plants are really well firmed in.
You need to do it with your heel. Don't sort of faff around with your hands. You've got to make sure the roots are in contact with the soil. If there's too much loose soil around the roots, not only will the roots dry out, which is bad for the plant, but the whole thing will start to rock. And obviously, in this kind of situation where you've got a fairly narrow bed, it's really important to firm it in. Now, when I'm tying in plants, I put the tie on and then wind it around a few times to sort of make a spacer. And then I tie the plant in. If you tie a plant directly onto a galvanised wire, after a while, the plant can actually grow into the wire, and that obviously can weaken the plant and it can snap at that point.
Camellias will take hard pruning, so they're great for training into a narrow space, but they should only be pruned after flowering. I'm just giving them a quick tidy and removing the dead wood, as if I pruned now, I take off the flower buds that are already growing for next spring.
I think one of the challenges with planting anything against a north-facing wall is you're quite limited in the selection of plants that you can use. The moment you start thinking about shrubs as well as climbing plants, it opens up more possibilities, obviously camellia being one of them. The other thing to think about is plants that are too vigorous for the south or west-facing aspects. Like this rose, we inherited this. It's Paul's Himalayan musk. Now, if that was on the southern side of the house, I'd never find the front door. It's such a vigorous plant, it really would race away and overtake the whole house. But here, those bad habits are controlled by it being in less than perfect conditions, but it still flowers really well and smells wonderful. Well, the camellias are looking really good, but I know the thing that's going to finish it off, and that's some underplanting. And this is one of my favourite plants, Brunnera Jack Frost. You've got this wonderful silver marking and green veining. You've got the glossy leaves of the camellia reflecting light, and now the silvery leaves of the Brunnera, and they're going to bounce light back as well, make the whole thing really feel light, lifted, and rather lovely.
And planting just one type of plant in this way, especially in a narrow bed, I'll get a coherent look that I really like.
Well, do you know what? I'm pretty pleased with that. It's certainly lifted the whole wall and made it a lot more interesting to look at. And of course, it's only going to get better once these fill out and become pillars of flower, which they will do in winter time. It's going to look lovely, actually. No, I'm very pleased.
Increasingly, I'm seeing the possibilities of using shady woodland plants, and they can be applied to almost any kind of garden, because most British gardens, essentially, I think, are clearings in a wood, and it doesn't matter if that's the middle of a city or out in the country. A few are exceptions to that rule, but you can apply it to an awful lot of situations. And if you understand how woodland plants grow, it certainly helps you get the best from them in your garden. For example, clematis. This is Clematis flammula. Now, all clematis are essentially woodland plants, and that means they're growing in the shade of trees and shrubs on a nice, cool, leafy woodland floor. And then they grow up looking for the light, and they will flower in the light. And if you try and replicate that, you won't go far wrong with all clematis. Cool roots in the shade, and then sun for the flowers. And up through this apple tree, you can see the lovely froth of flower. I love it at the moment. Beautiful plant. Over here, I've got Clematis alba luxurians. And look, there is a white foxglove poking through the clematis, completely the wrong time of year. 3 cheers for that. The weather might have caused problems for gardeners, but actually quite a lot of the vegetable garden has been fine. Carrots, which can be quite tricky, both to germinate and to grow with all the problems of carrot fly, have been fine. This is Nantes. Now you can see there's a certain amount of splitting. And the reason for that is because the soil is a bit rich for carrots. They don't like rich soil. They do much better in sandy conditions, well drained, that hasn't been manured or composted for a couple of years. So that's what's caused them to split. The taste will be fine, and not all of them have gone that way. You see, look at that. We now get into the realm of funny shapes from carrots, which is endless amusement, but they're delicious to eat. So a good year for carrots, a good harvest. The beet family has loved this summer. Chard, growing really well. This is Swiss chard, so we'll cut some of that. You can either harvest them individually, or you can cut a whole plant, and then that's a meal. And it cooks down like spinach, so you need quite a lot of the leaves, but not so many of the stems. Beetroot have had a wonderful year. In fact, almost too wonderful, because I've got some really big ones here. You see, this one is enormous. If you've got really big beetroot like this, they can be a bit woody, but they juice brilliantly. So don't throw them away, don't waste them, but simply juice them. So I'll have a couple of these whoppers for the juice. Runner beans have been really good, and I think that's been a question of timing. It's a certain amount of luck involved in that, because you can't tell what the weather's going to be like. But I can tell that this basil has been a complete disaster. The quality is terrible, to be honest. So I'm actually going to pull all this up and ditch it. It is not worth cooking with it, because it doesn't taste good. And that's purely because it didn't have enough heat. May, June, July, which it needed to get those oils going. So that's a failure. Cut your losses. Now, I don't regard this as a waste, throwing it away, because it doesn't make good food and it will make good compost. But when I was a child, I was very much brought up in the tradition that you wasted nothing. I remember the WI making jam out of everything and cakes. But the WI actually has become this very vibrant, modern institution. This year is the 100th anniversary. Rachel has been along to see them.
I have extremely fond memories of the WI because my mother was a member when I was a child, and I remember sometimes being able to go to the meetings and take a little flower arrangement or a miniature garden, and I loved that. But the WI is now very much forging into the 21st century. It's all about being inclusive, about education, but still those core values of growing, cooking and preserving your own produce are very much there, and they're as fashionable and relevant now as they've ever been. Kitty Lambar is one of over 200,000 members of the WI and the head of a team of 7 women behind this pretty and productive garden in Royal Victoria Park in the heart of the city of Bath. Hello. This is a hive of activity. I feel I must be in the right place.
You certainly
And
are.
you're Kitty.
I am Kitty, and this is the Bath Women's Institute garden. The original ladies who started this 3 years ago decreed that everything should be edible. In a funny way, it made it easier.
We're in Bath, and there is a bath I've spotted in your garden. What's the thinking?
bath is full of chamomile, and the flowers wave in the wind, and it looks just like a bubble bath. The Women's Institute started in Anglesey in Wales in 1915, and I wanted to depict that. That was my most important thing, really. And so I did a little Welsh cottage vegetable patch. The potatoes illustrate the roots of the Women's Institute, and the leeks illustrate Wales.
Of course.
And I hope that the ladies, if they came here today, would love what we've done.
This year is the 100th anniversary of the WI in the UK. It played a unique role in providing women with educational opportunities and the chance to learn new skills and campaign on important issues of the day. But one of its most vital original aims was to encourage women to grow and preserve food to supply a war-torn nation during the First and Second World Wars.
I love the fact you can sit here on this bench and just sort of, the sage is right there.
Yeah.
Oh, so you've got that wonderful aroma, and you've really dotted them around, haven't you, cottage garden style?
Yes. The flowers, the herbs, the vegetables, all muddled in together and jostling together.
Elaine, I bet many people wouldn't think of having dahlias included in a garden with an edible theme.
Lots of people don't realise you can eat the tubers.
So you eat the tubers?
Yes.
But you can also eat other parts of the plant?
Yes, the petals in Mexico are often made into colourful teas.
How do you get the very best from them?
Every few days we come and deadhead them so that we can
Yes.
keep them fresh.
So let me give you a hand and let's get rid of all these dead heads. Jean, I think it's quite an honour to be called the Charred Queen.
Yes.
They're such fantastic, versatile vegetables, though, aren't they?
Yes, they are, because the very small leaves can be used in salads, just as they are. And then the leaves, it's very much like spinach, so you lightly cook them. And then the stems are very nice in stir fries.
Yes. And speaking as a keen flower arranger as well, I would keep those stems, you know, with the dark colouring,
Yes.
and cut those for arrangements.
Yeah, because they've got this lovely feathery effect as well. And this year we might even try and save some of the seed so that we can have a go reusing it next year.
So very much in the Women's Institute ethos of not letting anything go to waste.
Yes, that's right, yes, use the whole thing.
The WI is rightly famous for its chutneys and jams, and preserving and pickling are core skills for many members. Kitty and her gang are no exception. So it's back to Kitty's kitchen to pickle the runner beans. I bet not many people have thought of pickling runner beans. So talk me through the process.
It's incredibly simple. You boil the beans for 10 minutes. Meanwhile, you are dissolving 3/4 pound of granulated sugar with a pint of cider vinegar, but you can use whatever vinegar you like. Add some juniper berries to that liquid, and then you simply strain the beans, put the two together, bruise some ginger, add that, and a lovely sprig of aromatic mint. Leave it for 2 weeks, and then enjoy. What do you think?
That is really good. Do you feel part of a sort of continuum, because WI members have been pickling for 100 years now?
They have for 100 years, when every bean was precious. This makes me feel connected with them and proud to be a member of the Women's Institute.
I want another one. They're very
They
good.
are, aren't they?
I think the combination of runner bean pickle and the WI is heady stuff. Really good. Now, in the spirit of recycling, not wasting anything, it's a really good time of year to collect seed. And then you can sow that and use it, save yourself money. And also there's a real sense of continuity, of the garden renewing and regenerating itself as being part of the flow of gardening. So I'm just drifting through the garden sort of once a week at this time of year, seeing what seeds are ready. Perhaps the most obvious and also the most beautiful are poppy seeds. These are opium poppies. And they have this incredible architectural seed head that starts out with a really lovely glaucous matte texture, as beautiful often as the poppy itself. And then as it starts to dry, these holes at the top open out. And it's so beautifully designed because you have this protective dome above and these vents that the seeds can come out. So when it shakes in the wind, you can hear the seed. It's a beautiful and a really clever way of storing it. And of course, all you have to do is just cut the seed head off, holding it upright so they don't spill out. When you're collecting seed, don't use plastic or polythene. Always paper. It can be paper bags, it can be envelopes of any kind, because they can breathe a little bit. And any moisture that's in the seed head, the stem, or the seed itself can cause possible fungal problems. So paper is what you need. And simply turn it upside down. And pop it in. Lots of stuff is still flowering. It's not all going to seed. The dahlias and the cosmos and the cannas have got plenty of life in them yet. But behind them, I've got this foxglove. So if I cut that off like that, every one of these, thousands of little seeds, and each one of those seeds is a foxglove. So you can see that when you're growing from seed, the potential for raising really a lot of plants is fantastic. What I'm going to do is put that over there, and in it goes. Come on, Monsieur Nige. Seed heads of Aquilegias. Put them in there, and then cut them. In a good year, there are lots of large fruit of this Fiorentino constelluto. This is not a good year, but that could give me the seed for a stunning harvest next year. Something, by the way, you want to do quite quickly is sorting out the chaff, cleaning them off, because the chaff, i.e. the husks and all the bits that don't form the germinating seed, have a potential to get a little bit mouldy, to have moisture, and that can damage the seed. So it's worth cleaning them up within weeks rather than months. As for the tomato, simply get a bit of kitchen towel, pop it on a plate or a tray or just a plastic container like that. And the easiest way to deal with it is simply cut it in half, and the riper the better, really. And there are the seeds, and you can just flip them out onto the paper. And at this stage, you can wash them and sieve them to get rid of this gelatinous surround, which slightly inhibits germination. But the easiest way to do it is let the paper soak it up until they dry. Then scrape them off the paper, rinse them in a sieve, let them dry thoroughly, and then store them in a paper envelope or bag, and they'll be ready to sow next February or March. And obviously label it so you remember. And the beauty of that is that having extracted the seed, you've got a tomato to eat. I have to say, I wish I could tell you that was delicious, but it wasn't. It was disappointing. Just slightly bland tomato. A tomato longing for the sun. Seeds tend to lose their ability to germinate with time, so I tend to keep seeds for about 2-3 years and then jettison them and just collect fresh. Well, that's collecting seed, and that's something that will continue over the next month or so. But here are some other jobs to do this weekend. Grazing rye is ideal at this time of year to enrich the soil with its dense root material, as well as providing a cover to stop weeds growing. Scatter the seeds thinly on well-prepared soil, then rake them over to cover them. They should germinate quickly while it's still warm, and then grow steadily over winter. Although agapanthus flowers best when their roots are constricted, sometimes they become too constrained and can even break the pot they're in. It's then time to divide them. I find using an old bread knife or an old saw ideal. Divide the plant up and repot each piece in a slightly larger pot with a gritty mix of compost, and it should be ready to flower next year. This is the perfect moment to make hardwood cuttings from roses. Choose a nice straight stem about the thickness of a pencil and strip the leaves off and divide it into lengths about 6 to 9 inches long. Cut the top of each piece at an angle so that you don't make the mistake of putting the cutting in upside down. Bury the cutting so that only an inch or two is above the surface of the gritty compost mix. Then put them somewhere sheltered where they can be left for at least a year before being potted on or transplanted. It might seem that summer is winding down and winter is remorselessly edging closer. But actually, there's a lot of life in the garden yet, and in the vegetable garden. Plants like runner beans, French beans will go on producing really well, for another month or more. So keep harvesting. And if they're a bit old and a bit long, well, you've always got that WI recipe. There's pickle to be made. That's it for today. I'll see you next time. Till then, bye-bye. Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. This is chicory, red Treviso. And all summer, these green leaves have been growing nice and lush, which in turn have fed in to create a deep taproot. And then it's the taproot that will produce the red leaves that we eat. So all this green growth will actually go eventually and not be eaten. And what I'm doing is clearing away the excess that's falling down, because there's a real risk that it can become really wet and clogged and rather rotten in there, and you want to let light and air into it. And the weather is getting colder. There's a real nip in the air this morning, and autumn is definitely coming in. But I think the garden is looking as good as it has done all year. There's masses of colour, and there's plenty of life in it yet. As part of our series celebrating extraordinary allotments, this week, Joe goes to Runcorn in Cheshire to visit a plot that is distinctly exotic.
Look at the size of that. Isn't that amazing?
And Rachel visits RHS Wisley to discover some new pests that have the potential to cause havoc in our gardens.
There, can you see the larvae in
Oh,
there?
yes. Oh, look at it wriggling around.
And I shall be looking at 3 very different types of lemon in the garden, as well as planting shrubs for berries in the wildlife garden. The days may be getting a lot shorter, but the colour is actually getting more intense. We've lost that bright, vivid exuberance that you get in June and July, and it's replaced with a richness. And that will carry on into October, and I often feel that the colours in the Jaw Garden are like a wine that you can swirl around your colour palette and just breathe it in. It's a wonderful moment, and what I want to do today is just add to it a little bit. We've got 2 very different types of plant. The first is a helenium, which is very much a plant of this time of year. Heleniums come from North America, and they grow on banks of rivers. They like moist soil, but open sunlight. This is called dark beauty. If you have a very wet garden, it's probably better to plant them in spring. But what I want to do is fill some gaps. We've got big gaps in here, and I want to introduce the colour. Now, they like, as I say, fairly damp conditions, but not boggy. And above all, they like sunlight. So don't put them in too much shade, and don't surround them with other plants. But this should be okay here. And I'm going to plant a little group. And there's one of the plants that, if you can, buy at least 3 and make a group, because they tend to grow much better in clumps. Whereas the helenium is a perennial that I'd like to last for years and years, this Rudbeckia is called Rudbeckia hirta cappuccino, and it's a biennial. You sow the seeds May, June. They then grow the plant for the rest of the summer, and then the following season, they come into flower. After it's finished flowering this year, that's it. It's done its stuff and can go. Although it might seem wasteful that these plants will only flower for another month or so, they cost about the cost of a pint of beer. Now, that strikes me as very good value indeed. Rudbeckia, again, comes from North America, and will like open spaces. And again, like heleniums, they do much better planted en masse. And it's these bronze marmalade tones that I absolutely love, and you do not get them earlier on in summer. I wait all year for them. and they never fail to delight. Now, one tip that is important is if you are planting at this time of year as opposed to spring, keep these plants well watered. They should now grow and give me colour this year, and then the heleniums will grow much stronger next year, spread, and I can divide them after 2 or 3 years and start building up stock. And hopefully, in about 3 or 4 years' time, they'll be well established as this lovely swathe of velvety colour from August through to October. One of the things that I like about the dual garden at this time of year is its lushness, and you can get quite an exotic feel. However, there is exotic, and then there is true exotic. And a few months ago, we asked you to write to us if you thought you had a special allotment. Either you were growing extraordinary things or it was an extraordinary place. And we received a letter recently from Stephen Saucer in Runcorn, who said that his allotment was exotic. So, Joe went along to have a look.
Dear Gardener's World, 10 years ago I bought Will Giles's book about exotic plants with pictures of his garden, and I was hooked. Sounds exciting.
Steve's been working this patch for 10 years and clearly has a way with tropical plants.
Oh, it's all happening through here then, is it? OK, yeah, OK, I found a jungle.
Yeah. I love the garden and I love being it. I love going through the foliage and picking bits up and tidying it up and making it look as best as I possibly can.
But you also like collecting things that other people might not have.
Yeah, like the Schefflerers, for instance. I've got a Schefflerer.
Yeah, I've got a Schefflerer as well. I bet my one's bigger than yours now, you see.
You can't even see my one.
Oh, these echiums are just brilliant, though, aren't they? And the narrow paths make it really feel like you're sort of in amongst it. Oh, and a nice palm here. So what's this one?
This is the Beauty of Capitata.
So can you leave that outdoors up here?
Yeah.
You serious?
Yeah, you can, yeah.
Do you wrap it up in the winter?
No. This is quite mature, this plant, and it'll take minus 12 degrees, so it's a quite hardy plant.
Wow.
Paulownia.
This is a Paulownia, but it's fantastic. I mean, look at the size of that. Isn't that amazing?
I trim it down about March, and when the little buds come up, I rub them all off except for one.
Yeah.
And that one grows into this stem.
Yeah. This is a ricinus,
Ricinus, yeah.
Yeah, because it sort of threw me, because often people go for the purple foliage and the purple stem ones. But this has got a really beautiful sort of blue stem.
Bluey-green colour, yeah.
Bluey-green. And these are the seed pods, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're so weird. But they're beautiful.
Yeah.
Absolutely beautiful. So it looks really mature. How long has this been planted, Steve?
This is the second year.
Second year?
Second year, yeah.
You serious?
Yeah.
So what sort of soil preparation have you done here?
Here it has to be well drained, so we have to put lots of sand in it and lots of grit. So, yeah, and it does take a long time watering as well.
But I would have thought there's no lack of moisture around this part of the world, or do you still have to water a lot?
Still have to water it because the leaves and everything, the plants are so big. After the rains have come, you go in and all around the plant is still dry.
Up here, to think that a lot of them are getting through the winter and actually put on this much growth, it's astonishing, I have to say. It feels as if you've created a real microclimate in here. It feels so protected.
The miscanthus up the end there stops the wind from blowing through, so everything in here is probably a couple of degrees higher than it is everywhere else because of that.
Wow, and it makes all the difference. I can almost hear it growing at the moment. Yeah. But where did it all start?
In the back garden at home. We've only got a small back garden. I did start off there with the Trachycarpus. In the middle, I stuck Abyssinian banana, the ventricosum, which grows, after 2 years, grows like 16 feet. So I couldn't bring that in the house. I brought it in the house the first year.
So what was the missus thinking?
When the back garden ended up as a jungle, she said, I want my garden back.
To maintain matrimonial harmony and not break the bank, Steve also uses his allotment for propagation.
So what's going on in here then, Steve?
These are the Brugmansias.
And you've got a couple of big ones over here then?
Yeah.
So are they going to flower this year, do you think?
Yeah, we've got a couple of buds coming up here.
Yeah, and how do you go about propagating?
And what you do is just under a leaf, you'll cut it off there.
Yeah.
And just above a leaf, you'll cut it off there.
Right, so you take a section out.
Yeah. And then what you do is you can wrap them up in the sphagnum moss, or in my case, a wet rag, and then you can bury it somewhere like the compost heap or somewhere like that, at least 9 inches down so the frost can't get at it, and then dig them up next year around spring and just pop them in a 3-inch pot and away they go.
Fantastic. I didn't know that at all.
Steve doesn't let anything stand still in his allotment. He's got a miniature date palm that's been hit hard by the cold summer.
So you're going to whip it out and what, pot it up and give it to someone?
Yeah, someone will have it, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll take that out and we'll put the Japanese anemones in, and it gives it a bit more colour amongst the foliage.
It's quite a spiky little number.
Yeah, yeah. I'll get in and
top.
start digging it. Just need to loosen it round the roots and then it should come out straight away.
Oh, there you go. OK, that'll come out quite easily. Oh, well, that'll pot up nicely as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, go on, I've got it. Yeah, lovely. Oh, it's quite heavy, actually, isn't it? So you've got these Japanese anemone, which I think are a fabulous choice. Now, what I really like about your garden, I'm not going to call it an allotment because it isn't really, it's the choice of plants. You know, you set the tone with all these tropical and exotic plants, and then you put things like Japanese anemones in, you know, red-hot pokers, and the brunnera. You know, you see that in a sort of woodland border. You wouldn't necessarily in a tropical garden, but they work so beautifully.
If you fit them together, put them in the right place, and it looks great. I try to put, like, cordyline, slim leaves with thicker leaf plants like bananas, musa, stuff like that.
Yeah. And when it's backlit, wow, those flowers are just singing out to me beautifully.
It's the big leaves and monsters. That's what I like. Yeah, it's transported into a tropical paradise. You wouldn't think he was in the northwest of England. You come down here, you could be anywhere in the world.
Yeah. Steve's jungle.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to call it. I think it's wonderful.
Although the front of this insette is pretty raggedy, the back is still actually really beautiful. Absolutely lovely. But I can't match anything that Stephen's growing. I'm amazed that it manages to survive so easily out of doors that far north. It does show you that a microclimate is as important as the macroclimate around it. One sad point in that is that Will Giles, who inspired Stephen to grow his exotic plants, died of cancer a few weeks ago. I remember filming Will and working with him, and not only was he a lovely man, he was a superb grower of exotic plants. And if nothing else, his memory lives on in the inspiration that he gave to Stephen, and no doubt many of you, to grow them likewise. These lemons have been out here on the mound for about the last 3 or 4 months, and I've been washing them weekly and giving them a bit of feed with liquid seaweed. When you water any citrus, you want to give them a good soak so that it runs throughout the bottom. The crucial thing at this time of year is don't prune them, don't pot them on, and do protect them in winter. They will need to come in under cover from about October, mid-October onwards to avoid the worst of the cold and the wet weather. And when you bring them in, they need to be cool and quite damp, quite humid. So indoors in the house is no good at all. A cold greenhouse is ideal. Don't be tempted to heat them, and cut the watering right down to about once a month. But they will still grow, they will still flower, they will still produce fruit. And they look fantastic, even if the fruit isn't ripe. And, you know, a gin and tonic with your own lemon is still a wonderful thing, even in the middle of a gloomy British winter. Now, the foliage, despite being a bit yellow, does smell fantastic, which brings me to my next lemon plant. Come on now, here, look, squeeze, here, squeeze. I've got a couple of plants growing side by side here in the herb garden which may not produce lemons as we know them, but boy do they produce a lemony scent. The first is Melissa, or lemon balm. And if I just take its foliage like that, up wafts this wonderful lemony, zesty smell. but it's not an entirely wonderful plant. If you grow it right, it's great and fantastic addition to a herb garden. But if you grow it in a border, mixed in with other plants, it can become very invasive. So I try and restrict it here to a raised bed where it can't go beyond the outsides. This is very poor stony soil, deliberately to get good drainage. And what's good is the fresh leaves. Those make a delicious tea. And what I would say is that when you get this old growth, cut it back. And what I'm left with is nice young growth. And this is what we'll use in the kitchen and to make a drink. But the best lemon plant of all is this. This is lemon verbena. It actually makes a woody shrub. And the scent is pure, undiluted sherbet lemons. I don't know if they still make sherbet lemons, but if you're of a similar age to me, you will remember them from your childhood. That absolute fizz of lemon. Probably the most powerful lemon scent in any plant. And it makes a wonderful tea, which, despite the exuberance of the smell, is actually a calmative. But it's not hardy. Lemon balm is as hardy as you like. Nothing will kill that. Lemon verbena is tender. So what I do is dig it up in the middle of October, put it in a plastic pot and pop it in the greenhouse. It's worth protecting because one whiff of that and I'm sitting looking over the Bay of Naples. I grow these carnivorous plants permanently in the greenhouse, even though actually they're pretty hardy because they're doing a job. They're catching insects. If you look inside some of these pitcher-shaped trumpets of the plants, this is Sarracenia, it's full of insects and wasps and even the odd moth in there. And it's catching insects that would otherwise be damaging the plants. And it can seem at times that the garden is being assaulted from all sides. Well, if you think you know all your enemies, think again, because new pests are coming into the country all the time. And Rachel went along to RHS Wisley to see what the latest potential problems are to arrive in our gardens.
Since the 1970s, the RHS Advisory Service, based in the laboratory building at Wisley, has been doing research and providing advice to help gardeners make informed choices about the plants they choose to grow and how to control pests and diseases. But in recent years, inquiries have been flooding in about some new insect pests that seem to be marching across the country. Dr. Hayley Jones is at the forefront of research into a set of alien invaders that might just have landed in your back garden. Hayley, hi.
Hello.
Now, I'm hearing much more that gardeners are beginning to find some more unusual pests.
There's a few new pests that we've been keeping track of, some of which are much harder to spot than others, so I thought maybe we could go out in the garden and see what we can find.
So I've got my specs with me, trusty magnifying glass.
Yep.
We're going to go
Okay.
hunting. On the RHS information hit list are several new bugs that have been spotted within the gardens.
Oh, Hayley, is that one just there?
Yes, it is. This is the rosemary beetle, so called because it feeds on rosemary, but it also can feed on thyme and sage and lavender as well. It's only been in the UK as the late 90s, early 2000s, but it's now quite widespread.
What sort of damage do they do?
Damage can be quite subtle, nibbling at the leaves, but sometimes the plant can die, but that's usually if it's under some other stresses as well.
So what about control for this?
Well, the main thing is to take them off a plant. An easy way to do this is to put newspaper underneath and to shake the plant because they've got this dropping mechanism. They'll fall off and you can gather them up and take them away.
I think that sounds like a great one. I think I'd do that. But for people who want to spray, perhaps?
The adult beetle is quite resistant, so it's best to target the larvae. But you've got to make sure that you use a pesticide that's suitable for use on edible herbs.
I think, Hayley, there's nothing quite like this blue of an agapanthus. It's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, and Agapanthus is quite well known for hardly having any pests or diseases that affect it. But I'm actually working on a research project at the moment of a new pest that you might never have seen before, which is the Agapanthus gall midge. This was first spotted last year, and it was so new that it hasn't got a scientific name.
This is all looking good.
Yeah, the signs can be quite subtle. You can see this kind of slight discoloration. This probably won't flower because it's got the larvae of the gall midge inside. So if I break this open, there, can you see the larvae in there?
Yes.
They only get about as big as 3 millimetres, and that's it, so you really have to be looking hard.
Oh, look at it wriggling around. There are 2 other pests that the RHS is currently monitoring. The first attacks daylilies in early summer and is known as the Hemerocallis gall midge. The affected buds are much shorter and fatter than normal, and when they're split open, they're full of tiny maggots. The other is Berberis sawfly, the larvae of which can defoliate a plant in next to no time. So if you think you've seen any of these alien outlaws in your garden, you can do your bit and get in touch via the RHS website. Click on the link of the pest you've spotted and enter your information to help track their spread. When a potentially major new pest emerges, it can make headline news, and that's when the experts here at Wisley are called on to help calm the media storm that inevitably follows.
Introducing the box tree caterpillar. The plant on the right was only infected a few days ago. Give it a week and it'll look like this.
So has all that commotion now begun to die down, or are you still inundated with inquiries?
Yes, after the news piece went out, we really were getting so many inquiries, some about the box tree moth, but there was a lot of mistaken diagnosis as well.
Obviously, so many of us have box in our gardens. What should we be looking for?
Well, it's best to get in amongst the plant, pull the branches apart, because the caterpillars will be hiding in there. You should be able to see their webbing and also their frass, which is their excrement, like little green pellets, and the caterpillars themselves. So you can see they're green and black with these stripes.
I have to say they're really similar, actually, to a cabbage white. So how would you tell the difference?
The main difference is that these caterpillars only feed on box. The large white will feed on all kinds of things in the cabbage family, nasturtiums. Unless it's on box, it's not the box tree caterpillar.
What should you do then to try and control them?
So the first thing is to go through and try and remove as many as possible. But if there's really lots of them, there's some pesticides that can work against them. The problem is where the box is so dense and the webbing protects them, it can be hard to get the pesticides to really work, so thorough application is necessary.
Now, I really like the idea of picking them off, and then perhaps you could put them on a bird table, so at least the birds get the benefit of your pests.
Yep, that would be good. You just have to keep an eye on them, check they don't wriggle off and make their way back to your box plant.
Over the years, gardeners have learned to live with a whole host of garden nasties. And while there are new pests on the block, maybe we should just keep calm and carry on gardening.
This is the wild garden, and I planted up the bee border and the pond, and that attracted masses of bees. We've got frogs, we've got grass snakes, but this remains woodland in concept. So I want to put some body in, some backbone, which comes from shrubs. And because it's a wildlife garden, those shrubs need to serve a purpose other than just aesthetic. So I've chosen 3 that are particularly good for berries, which are great for birds. Now, the first is Paracantha. I've got 2 types here, sapphire red and sapphire orange. Birds love Paracantha, and bees love them too, because those berries, of course, are preceded by flowers. One word of warning about Paracantha: they are very thorny, so they should never be put in the middle of a border or near a path. Behind it, I've got a Viburnum opulus, the Guelder rose. This is much more loose and open and has these fabulous bunches of berries that look like currants. Again, birds adore them. And then they have white lace-cap flowers in spring. Now, before I plant, you can see that this soil is dry and a little bit thin. And actually, what I'm going to add is this, which is spent compost from a trough that we were growing herbs in. And it's got a mixture of grit, leaf mould, and the roots from the herbs, and that's fine. That doesn't matter at all, because that's organic material, will break down and help enrich the soil and increase its structure. If you plant it slightly up above the ground, the roots will go down and out, and they tend to grow sideways. So it's not depth you want, it's a good lateral growth. Viburnum is essentially a woodland plant, so it likes light, dapple shade. Paracantha will grow in dry shade and in very poor soil. But that doesn't necessarily mean you get the best from them. If you want maximum berries, either for just simply aesthetic pleasure or to attract birds, give them some daylight. They don't need the best spot in the garden, but they will benefit from a little bit of TLC. It is really important that after you've planted any shrub or tree, give it a good soak. That's the time to add a bit of goodness. This is leaf mould that I'm using. And this lovely, soft, crumbly stuff, last year, 12 months ago, were all leaves attached to the trees, still not even beginning to turn in colour. So it's amazing that you just collect them up as they fall and leave them. And it's the perfect mulch for woodland plants. Well, it's not quite yet time to gather leaves. But here are some jobs that it is time for this weekend. Not only is it time to plant bulbs into the garden, but also into pots. An Iris reticulata put into pots now will give you a flare of intense blue next January and February. Choose a nice terracotta pot and use a very gritty compost. Half fill it, place the bulbs about an inch apart in the pot, top it up, and then put a covering of grit. Water them and put them somewhere where they won't be soaked by rain. They don't need protection from cold, but mustn't be allowed to get too wet. If you took hardwood cuttings, like these blackcurrants last year, they will now have developed into strong plants. But if you leave them over winter, there's a risk that the roots will become intertwined. So dig them up individually and either transplant them to where they're to grow, or, if that space isn't ready, pot them up into normal potting compost, water them, and put them somewhere to store over winter, ready for planting next spring. Most hardy annuals can be sown next spring, but a few, and in particular Ami majus or Ami visnaga, do much better if sown now, in September. Sprinkle the seeds onto seed compost, water them, and put them somewhere protected to germinate. Then the small plants can stay in a greenhouse or a cold frame over winter and will grow away faster and stronger next spring. Well, the days might be getting shorter and winter might be coming, but the light on a clear day at this time of year is fabulous. And although there's less and less of it every day, while it lasts, I absolutely love it. And there are apples to come. However, that's all we've got time for today. See you next time. Bye-bye.